WhatsApp ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਹਰ ਹਫਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਵੇਂ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ 'ਚ ਮਿਲਾਈਏ, ਕੋਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਅੱਛੀ ਕੋਈ ਖਾਸ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰੀਏ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਬਿਲ ਬਲੇਅਰ। ਮਿਸਟਰ ਬਲੇਅਰ ਇਜ਼ ਆਵਰ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਫ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਸਿਕਿਉਰਿਟੀ ਐਂਡ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਰਿਡਕਸ਼ਨ। ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਨੇ। ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਟਾਈਮ 'ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ, ਗਨ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ, illegally people crossing the border. There are many issues which we are going to talk to him in this conversation. So first of all, we are welcoming him. Mr. Blair, thank you very much for coming to our studio.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for sparing some time. I know you are quite busy in the elections, and you yourself is a candidate for Liberal Party again.
Sure.
So last time when you joined Liberal Party and contested elections, definitely having a vast experience as a police chief, working, leading a force, heading a force. So you came with some aspirations. But in politics, when you come to reality, so how much satisfied you are with the 4-year journey so far?
Well, you know, the Prime Minister has given me a number of very significant responsibilities to deal with issues that are very really real and serious concern to Canadians. You know, you spoke of the issue of gun and gang violence. I speak to the people of all of our communities across Canada, certainly in the Greater Toronto area. People are genuinely concerned about the incidents of gun violence in their communities and the attraction that gangs can have for our youngsters. And so it's something I've worked on my whole life, and I'm honored that the Prime Minister has given me an opportunity to bring forward new legislation and regulations, new investments and new supports for communities and for the police to keep our communities safe. I also have responsibility for the issue of money laundering. And, you know, I've worked in organized crime and fighting organized crime for most of my adult life. Before I was the police chief, I was responsible for organized crime investigations. And I know that, you know, we need stronger laws and we need better resources for the law enforcement community and the better sharing of intelligence information to deal with the threat of organized crime and their illicit money. Because it can corrupt our financial institutions and it can have a real impact on the quality and the cost of our lives. I've also been asked by the Prime Minister, you know, we had a situation a number of years ago where as a result of some changes in policy that Mr. Trump brought into the United States, we saw a large number of people who had sought refuge in the United States suddenly flee to Canada. And they were coming across our border in a regular fashion. And Mr. Trudeau called me immediately and said, we need to make sure that that's properly managed. Canadians are concerned. And so I went there. And I worked with the RCMP and the Canada Border agencies to make sure that we had adequate resources, that everyone that crosses that border would first of all be checked and investigated so that there's no criminality or threat to our security. I will tell you 40% of them were children, it's mostly families. But we wanted to make sure that there would be no criminals coming to the country. But I also looked at the processes by which Canadian laws were being upheld and the rules regarding how those people were to be dealt with. And I wanted to make sure that the laws were being applied fairly, but also that we were ensuring that our system was efficient and working properly. And so, you know, we've brought forward a number of very significant measures. We've doubled the capacity of the Immigration Refugee Board because those decisions have to be made quickly, and if people need our protection, they get it. If they do not, they are removed.
Okay.
And that's what Canadians expect. But, you know, one of the things I can tell you about that, which was very interesting to me, there was no threat to our safety. But Canadians have a very strong sense of fairness, and they wanted the rules to be applied. And they wanted people treated with compassion, but they wanted to make sure that everyone followed the rules. I agree with them.
That's not being abused.
That it's not being abused. And so that was the job that the Prime Minister gave me. There are a number of other significant issues that I have responsibility for, and I'm pleased we have been able to make real progress on many of these files, but there's more work to be done. And it's one of the reasons I decided to run again. We talked during the last election and as to why I chose to do this after my policing career, but the work is not done. There's more that needs to be done. And I have an opportunity. We've just recently, for example, brought forward a new policy to keep guns off our streets, to make it more difficult for criminals to gain access to guns, because guns are causing a serious threat to our safety and causing people to be fearful in their communities for themselves and for their children. And so it's time to take strong action to keep guns out of our communities. And so we brought forward measures to do that. And I've been working with mayors and police chiefs right across Canada. They have told me, we need more resources. We need help to keep our communities safe. And we're going to make sure they get that help. We're going to invest in those communities, invest in those kids, help those communities be safer and stronger. And frankly, as long as the Prime Minister gives me an opportunity to continue to work hard to keep all Canadians safe, I'm honored to have the opportunity to do the work.
Mr. Blair, recently we have seen a spike, increase in violence, particularly in the city of Toronto and adjoining areas. Who can be the better person than you to tell us? You have headed the force, you have worked very closely with your force. What is the reason all of a sudden this increase in the violence?
There's a number of things that have been taking place, not just in Toronto, but certainly in Toronto. First of all, I think that we took a number of very effective measures during my term as the police chief to make sure the police were in neighborhoods and that they were connected to communities. The police alone cannot keep us safe. It's working with the people in communities, working with teachers and social workers and youth workers, parents, businesses. We all have this shared responsibility. And we have to make sure that our officials have the resources that they need in order to keep our communities safe. Communities need more support. We've seen some cuts recently to some of these community organizations. We need to make sure that they have the resources so that our kids can be successful in school, so that people can get good jobs, so that we can deal with issues of inequality and injustice in our communities to help young people make better decisions. We've seen that happening. We've also seen, there's been some changes in the way in which our communities are being policed, and as a result, we're starting to see a significant increase in guns in our communities. Handguns, and they come from 3 different places. We know some of them are smuggled across the border. We live next door to the United States, and guns are very easy to get in the United States. And so we have seen criminals buy guns in the U.S., smuggle them into Canada, and sell them to gangsters. We also know many guns are being stolen from legal gun owners, and even the gun that was used most recently in the Danforth shooting, a tragedy in which 13 people were injured and 2 young girls lost their lives. That gun was stolen from a gun store in Saskatchewan. Had it been stored properly in a vault, that gun may never have ended up on the streets of Toronto. And so we're going to bring in new regulations that require more secure storage of those guns and more responsible ownership of those guns.
The story is demanding ban on the handguns. How much difference it can make?
Well, let me tell you what I believe is the right thing to do and what we are proposing. We know that guns are being stolen, and we also know guns are being illegally sold. We need to stop those things by making gun owners be more responsible in their secure storage and by providing greater oversight and accountability for the selling of those weapons. In all parts of Canada, those guns must be stored securely. But I've talked to Mayor Tory, Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown out here in Peel Region. They all wanted to do more to keep guns out of their community. And so I've discussed with them, perhaps a city might say, for example, the only legal place to use a handgun is at a range, a licensed range. And so, in the perspective of many of the mayors, that gun should only be stored at the place where it can be legally used, in a proper vault with proper security measures so that it is not vulnerable to being stolen or diverted into the criminal market. And so a city may say, instead of allowing people to store it in a safe at home, we will require them to store it at the only place it can be used legally. Under more secure storage. That isn't a ban, but it's significant restriction on where those guns can be available in our community. And the particular vulnerabilities of certain cities and towns and communities need to be acknowledged and recognized. And I think it's important for all 3 orders of government to cooperate, to work with each other. And the requirements in a small rural community in Western Canada or Northern Ontario may be different than in a big city like Mississauga or Toronto. And so, we have to have laws that apply to the entire country, but we also have to have the flexibility to respond to the unique concerns of some of our communities and some of our cities. And so we're working hard to do that because it really is a shared responsibility and a partnership. But ultimately, there are some politicians that want to see us have an American gun culture. They want us, that everyone should have a gun and that we should carry them for self-protection. You hear sometimes they talk about, gun ownership should be a right. I respectfully disagree. I believe that gun ownership in this country is a privilege. It's a privilege earned by Canadians who obey our laws and who are responsible in their use of their firearms, and they make sure that their firearms don't end up in the hands of criminals. And I will tell you from experience, the overwhelming majority of Canadians who do own firearms, hunters and farmers and sport shooters, Well, they're very law-abiding, very responsible, and I have a great deal of respect for them, and I don't want to do anything that would impede or interfere with those legal and safe activities of our hunters and sport shooters. But at the same time, we have to take the steps necessary to make sure those guns don't get in the hands of criminals. And frankly, we don't want to live like an American gun society.
Mr. Bill Blair is our special guest tonight, and he is Minister of Border Security and Crime Reduction. We are in election mode, so we are going to talk to him regarding some upcoming election issues also, but after the break.